This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather Ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, January the 20th, it's usually when a U.S. president gets inaugurated, but this isn't a U.S. president on the stage. This is about the 1991 AFC title game, which saw the Buffalo Bills crush the LA Raiders in defined powder. Now, normally when I do on this days, I don't do like consecutive days with the same year, which is unusual. But it was just coincidence. Yesterday, I did the All-Star game for 1991 for the NHL because they put. I thought they played on a Sunday, but I guess not. Well, no, that wouldn't make sense because NBC broadcasts the NFL playoffs. So it's the 1991 NFL playoffs. This was the first time that the NFL had a 12-team playoff format. Back in 1978, they changed things to have 5 per conference or 10 teams overall make the playoffs. You win your division, and then you play in a one. You win your division, you're in the Final Four. However, there'll be a one-game wildcard match between the top two teams that did not win their division, and then that team will face the 1 seed unless it's from your own conference division, meaning that you can't face each other. Anyway, this would be huge and all that. So now there's a new format for the 1991 NFL playoffs. There'd be 12 teams. So now there'd be 6 teams per conference qualifying for the playoffs. So there'll be 3 teams that get in as a wild card. So what happens is that the top 2, the 3 division winners, the top 2 records meant that they would be hosting a divisional playoff round and got a bye. The lower seeded divisional winners would have to play the 6th seed or the last wild card, and then the 4 and 5 would face each other and all that. So that was just playing huge and all that. And this 12-team thing actually was huge because that it abolished the no division rule, meaning that if the 1 seed and the worst seed coming out of the wild card, like say the 5 or 6 seed, were in the same division, they could still face each other in the divisional round. So anyway, it was modified. So the 91 format would be modified in 2002 when the NFL went to an 8 division format, meaning that the 4 division winners would be from 1 to 4. Of course, top 2 would get divisional rounds bye, and then the other 2 would have to host in the wild card. And then, of course, this is the time that now we have 14 teams in the playoffs. So the Buffalo Bills were the 1 seed. They would wait. They would have to wait on their opponents. They would take on the Miami Dolphins in the first divisional round game of the new format in history. Miami had just squeaked by Kansas City 17-16 to head to Buffalo, where Marv Albert and Paul McGuire would do the game. Not the great Dick Enberg, but Marv Albert. And it was a hard-pressed game. It was 44-34, a shootout. Dan Marino was just that damn good, but Buffalo survived 44-34. Meanwhile, the Raiders, as the 2 seed, got to host their game. So the Raiders were the 2 seed. They faced the Bengals, who hosted Houston and crushed Houston 41-14 in the playoffs. So that meant they had to go to Los Angeles to face the Raiders at Memorial Coliseum. Dick Enberg and Bill Walsh on the call. So anyway, the Raiders looked good. And yes, this is the game that saw Bo Jackson's dislocated hip ruin his career in football. And also baseball to that effect. His artificial hip did help him play baseball. But still, I mean, that was it. Yeah, it was that whole Bo Jackson thing. And actually, caused a degenerative bone condition in the hip called avascular necrosis. And all that. And Bengals fans actually said that this was a curse on the Bengals franchise because they injured Bo Jackson. The Bengals would not win another playoff game until just this past year, 2022. And they beat the Raiders, ironically. So now the Raiders would have to head to Buffalo with Emberg and Walsh doing the call. Occasional rain, 3 Celsius, 38 Fahrenheit, 80,000 fans would pack Rich Stadium. So anyway, we had a great matchup in store. So, Buffalo took on the Raiders. And Art Shell was trying to become the first African American coach in a Super Bowl. Admirable. Anyway, so Buffalo took charge in the first quarter on a James Lofton touchdown pass from Jim Kelly. Yeah, James Lofton played for Buffalo and all that. In the meantime, Jeff Jagger kicked the 41-yard field goal, 7-3. Okay, no big deal. But then Furman Thomas with a touchdown run, make it 14-3. And Darryl Talley with a pick six, 21-3. This was the first quarter. So the Bills were on pace for 84 points, which would have shattered the record for most points in a playoff game by one team. The second quarter was not the Raiders' best time either. Kenneth Davis got a touchdown run. They missed the extra point. And then Davis got a 3-yard touchdown run when Scott Norwood kicked the extra point. Yes, Scott Norwood was the kicker for the Bills at that time. And then Jim Kelly passed to James Lofton. It was 41-3 at the half. Can you imagine a team being up by more than 35 points at the half? In a conference championship game, no less. It was like, you just got stunned and all that. It was just nothing. Jay Schrader thought he was all powerful and all that. But unfortunately, misery would love company as their first 3 drives ended with interceptions. Kenneth Davis would get another touchdown to make it 48-3, and then a field goal by Norwood made it 51-3. So the Bills put up not 1, but 7 touchdowns on this day for the conference championship. They missed an extra point, but then they kicked a field goal. So Furman Thomas ran for 130 yards and a touchdown, which is weird because Kenneth Davis got 3 rushing touchdowns, only getting 21 yards on 10 carries. Buffalo set the record for most points in the first half by a team in the playoff. 41. Hard pressed. Now, a game comparable to this is kind of Texas Christian Georgia, just the national championship just this year. So anyway, yeah, it was humongo. Furman Thomas doing his job. Buffalo picked off the ball 6 times, which was the 3rd highest total ever. Jay Schrader couldn't believe his luck. He was 13 for 31 and all that. And threw 5 interceptions, which would tie Dan Pastorini and Richard Todd for the record at the time for most interceptions thrown in a playoff game. The record actually was shattered by Brett Favre 11 years later in 2002 against the Rams. But it still stands. But that 5 touchdown interception a day was the worst in either a conference championship or a Super Bowl. Although Rich Gannon would throw for 5 interceptions in Super Bowl 37. Finally, the Raiders had enough and got Vince Evans to replace Schrader, and he was 2 for 8. Marcus Allen could not do his job, only getting 26 yards. And it was just unbelievable. So the Raiders basically were bit because of Bo Jackson. Excuse me. Yeah. Like O.J. Simpson, before he did what he did in 94 and, and what he did in 2007, was one of the sideline reporters, and he basically said that Jackson's injury would cost him the miss the AFC title game and the start of baseball. A lot of people criticize his remark, but OJ was right the whole time. All that. The Raiders would not get to an AFC title game for 10 years before being taken out by the Ravens. So anyway, the Bills were going to the Super Bowl. I was like, well, okay. But here's the thing about the Super Bowl and all that. The Bills would have to, it was figured that the Bills and Niners were going to meet, and the Niners were going to try for their three-peat. Well, unfortunately, that would not happen. Last year, I did the NFC title game 1991, like the Bills, between the Giants and Niners, and how the Giants used 5 field goals to beat the Niners, and then got to Super Bowl 25 where they won. I don't remember doing Super Bowl 25 as a video, so I'll probably have to work on that as my next project. But it is what it is, and that is all that it is. So Buffalo puts up 51 points to win the AFC title. Believe it. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond to do.